Kavya, for that introduction. May I also, on behalf of ET, welcome Roshni Malhotra. SDG is obviously, this refers to the UN's SDG goals, but in the case, because of if you've been following what's been happening in the pandemic, it somehow gets intertwined with a lot of issues, including the issues of sustainability, shifting world economies in a more, away from fossil fuels, and basically promotion of renewable fuels and so on and so forth, which is, even during the pandemic, it has emerged as a major theme. So let me start off by asking, Roshni, on that, post pandemic, or as the pandemic hopefully comes towards some kind of an end, the focus of most companies, at least in their rhetoric, has been shifting towards a green recovery. Now, do you think a green recovery can work when it comes to jobs, income, business growth?
Thank you so much, Bodhi. Delighted to be here. So actually, the conversation of perhaps green recovery has been there for a significant period of time, but as you said, the pandemic has also highlighted it quite a bit more. And I think that it is not just needed for income, jobs, and companies, but I think today it's really needed for survival. If we just look at what's been happening in India over the last couple of decades, we have only 4% of natural forest cover left in our entire country. Starting with the tsunami many years ago, since then the number of natural disasters have increased significantly. And if you look at, it's not just loss of lives, but it's also loss of the economical damage that it does, the people that it causes displacement. I mean, there are enough metrics to say that today it is absolutely imperative that any business not only look at the environment that they exist in, but the adjacent environments around them, because it's a ripple effect and it can have catastrophic repercussions. I think India, like most companies and countries all over the world, are also competing on a global landscape. And as you said, that it's become much more competitive. There is a global surge and demand to work with those who are much more conscious. So I think that it's not just a movement in India, but I think it's a movement everywhere. And it's perhaps here to stay. And as you said, the pandemic has heightened it quite a bit. And I hope, everybody goes in the right direction, because it's economically extremely damaging not to.
No, I mean, there's no direct link between the pandemic and global warming and the effects of global warming. Although it so happens, I mean, if you've seen the fires in the US or Australia, there seems to be a greater number of these extreme, weather effects, and there are obviously long-term issues about let's say a city like Bombay, from where I'm, speaking to you, as to what happens. Does parts of Bombay, the island of Colaba, does it go underwater in 20 or 30 years? And if so, how do we mitigate that? Is that something? So on. So I mean, these are very complex and deep questions. But sorry.
I mean, Bodhi, it's interesting you say that, because while that's the struggle that you're having in Bombay, I mean, today cities like Chennai are running out of water. So, right. So I think that it's, and that has devastating impact on the number of industries that exist there, people that exist there, work there. So I think that it is a much larger issue than just a natural issue. Yeah.
Of course, now, I completely agree. So let me then, before I come to the SDG part of it and education, which you've completed, let me just focus on this theme. So there is an argument which is made that it's so if you look at, let's say, India's the renewable space, and I'm using the term renewable somewhat loosely, I'm essentially meaning it to mean solar and wind. And if but the proportion of India's electricity which is being generated through these two routes is in fact going up. It is a I mean we are now at a significant levels, the tariffs are coming down and so on and so forth. It is gaining some kind of a critical mass. But an argument is made that India still has rich coal resources. A lot of it is still underexploited or not used. And India would need to sacrifice a fair bit of economic growth were it not to exploit these resources. And why should we not do that? What would be your views on that?
Well, I don't know much, I have to be honest, about where our coal reserves are, but one could do an assessment to say, are they in geographies which require natural preservation? Because to exploit them could actually cause a further ripple effect for cities and towns and people. Also, our cities are under a lot of pressure. Our big main cities, which are, Delhi, Mumbai, Chennai, Bangalore, Hyderabad. So all of a sudden, you're also having a certain burgeoning of tier one, tier two cities and tier three cities where people are migrating as well for jobs and for opportunities. Perhaps some of them are more closer to where the reserves are. So is there an effect? I think it's something that needs to be studied. But I do also think that in renewable energy, Bodhi, there's so much technological innovation that has taken place, not just in India, but all over the world, that it's economical sacrifice in the short term for a larger gain in the medium to long term. So I think that, do you want to approach this as a short-term solution or a long-term sustainable one?
Yeah, indeed. No, these are hard choices which I think countries at a societal level, countries will have to make. I mean, it's no longer, and I would actually agree with a lot of what you have said. I think these coal reserves are, as we know, in what are still dense forest areas. So there are lots of issues there. Let me, as you also said, cities in India, even in India, face sort of diverse sorts of climate challenges and so on. At the level of a corporation, what can companies do? And you're heading you became chairman of the company, chairperson of the company. I don't know what term you use, whether it's chairman or chairperson or chair. After your father stepped down in July. So, what at the level of a corporation, what can companies do, and what does HCL do
So
to
I
run
think,
its business in a more sustainable manner?
so I think obviously, for our particular industry, I think our carbon footprint has come down significantly, but that's also just been a function of, our entire workforce pretty much working from home. So, there has been, and I was on a community of chairpersons meeting a few weeks back, and it was very interesting because actually what companies in our industry do is not really representative of the gold standards of what a company can do, because some of the heavy industry companies in mining and the ones that actually have the larger impact on climate and sustainability are the ones that will come up with perhaps the most cutting edge solutions on how they run alternatively. So I think in a lot of our companies and in our industry, reduction of carbon footprint, certain commitments towards water rejuvenation, using greener buildings, greener technologies. There's a lot that we can do. I don't know how big our impact will be in comparison to some other industries, but I think what I find missing, Bodhi, is that we talk about renewable energy and we talk about carbon footprint, but India just being a population of more than 1 billion people, there is also a very unique discussion which is yet to happen in India around circular economy, which is using of renewable resources. These could be the tons of e-waste that comes into that we all dispose in our country, how you can extract precious metals and actually reuse them for manufacturing. It could be, so I think that there, I mean, you would know this better than I, but there must be new burgeoning opportunities in industries which are coming up in the renewable area, which even industries and companies such as ours would then be big customers too, because we would need that ecosystem to exist to be truly renewable. Right now, the ecosystem doesn't fully exist.
Yeah. I think, for example, the circular. There's been a lot of literature on the circular economy recently, and I think in the US there is, or indeed in the Western world, there is a right to mend. Which is a major, sort of social movement, new age social movement, one can call it, because we obviously throw away our iPhones or whatever, or laptops. But I think that also has, as you said, increasingly adverse environmental impact. But this is not. But the circular economy, if I'm not mistaken, is still, has it caught on in India in any significant way? Do you see that?
No, that's what I was saying to you, that I don't know how much it is caught up in India. But given that we are such a large and populous nation, that I would almost think that it would be an opportunity and more necessary, provide us an ecosystem to be able to leverage to become that much greener.
Right.
Yeah.
And pardon my ignorance, but does HCL itself have carbon neutral sort of goals? And if so, by what year? Do you have a time frame to achieve that?
We do have goals, and we're going to be coming out with our own goals shortly. So I will refrain from sharing them here at the moment, but we do have goals as well. Yeah.
What is your view, broadly speaking, on the whole ESG sort of ESG investing theme, which has really emerged as a dominant theme in the last few years? Do you think there is an element of virtue signaling there, which there could well be? It doesn't mean that virtue signaling is wrong, or not desirable, or do you think it is here to stay, and it's a good thing, and it's kind of, and more importantly, let me frame: is it actually working in propelling companies in a more desirable, environmentally conscious direction?
So I think what I find extremely interesting about ESG is that because of just ESG, so it's environment, social, and governance, it's actually forcing companies to integrate all three together. So I think there would have been some companies who would have been focusing on just environment. There would be some companies who would be focusing on the social aspect, and there could have been some that were focusing on governance. So I think now it's allowing all of us to kind of look at it holistically and trying to integrate all three. So, and each has a role to play. So it is probably here to stay. It's fairly good practices. If you read a lot of literature outside the rating agencies, I think there is a lot of that one can do. And it's also, Bodhi, in a lot of ways, throws up questions on what's generally happening in the world today, around diversity or around inclusion, around equal opportunity, around, where to play, how to play, if to play, how to succeed. Perhaps for a lot of us also a certain differentiation. And especially if you have to compete and exist in the global economic environment, then I think that it's going to become that much more relevant.
Right. As you said, a lot of concepts are sort of, in the ESG arena also tends to get mixed up, because governance is obviously related to your environmental, what you're doing to the environment, but it's not exactly the same thing. Governance could be about many other issues. So that I agree. So and indeed this whole SDG element, the whole SDG theme. So let me come to the SDG part of it, or some of the developmental part of it. Obviously, education is a major tool for upward mobility in India, and the Shiv Nadar Foundation, philanthropic activities has played a major role. You obviously set up the university. Can you talk about how you think the education sector has been affected in the last 17, 18 months of the pandemic, and especially for children, and indeed across the board, and how there is obviously it's been affected in an adverse way, right? Because most people don't have access to laptops or at home. Most Indians don't. Most Indian kids don't have. And how do we improve, or how do we reverse the losses, or the which may have happened in the last 17, 18 months, the regression which might have happened in the last 17, 18 months?
So I think the impact of the last 17, 18 months, will definitely be there in the medium to long term. There's no real way to measure it at the moment. There is lost time and lost curriculum, but I'm sure that schools and teachers, whether government or private, will find a way to make that up. I think what's really been lost, and it's not just applies to schools, but even to workplaces, is the social development, and the ability to actually meet in person and actually collaborate and work together. However, that is what is demanded of us, in an environment when we're as adults. So I think that those are some of the losses which are going to be quite difficult to mend. I think your point on quality, equal education is also very important, because how do you get everyone to compete if their start points are different? So there are some that have really benefited in the last 18 months because, as you said, they had access to technology, they had access to laptops or personal computers, and they could code, they could do online school, they could do. But then there was also almost 50% of our nation and children who live in rural areas who did not have that kind of access. But I think, at least for the Shiv Nadar Foundation, we cut across the spectrum of urban to rural in terms of our institutions. And I think for the rural institutions, what we thought worked really well is, we had, we would have these buses, and we would be running classes in villages using speakers. You just had to use some sort of innovation, and there'd be a teacher, and then you would have to have books distributed, you'd have to have some worksheets. And I think the level of assessment that you do has to change, because you cannot have the same standards as you had in the previous years. I mean, you could even see the kind of changes which were made to the board examinations, for example. And, I think that some of these steps had to be taken to alter the way assessment is done, because the learning environment had changed. So I think that even though we might go back, schools are opening up, students are going back to school, but it'll be interesting to see that in the long term, will it evolve into a sort of a hybrid model, and the ways of assessment will change. And, maybe in some ways it could also be a good thing, because it helps us evaluate our curriculums and see, is this the right, are the students really just studying or are they learning? I think is the question. And you will only know a few years from now, did they actually learn, or did they it was just 17, 18 months of a waste?
Right. But you would say that, I mean, would you agree that it's important that schools are reopened as soon as possible, subject, of course, to safety concerns?
Yeah, Bodhi, I'm a mother of two young kids. I am ready for them to go to school. So you will always get a biased opinion from me. Yes, they should be at school, and they should be at school every day.
Yeah. No, I mean, the point is that, I mean, I don't know how you could, let's say, learn maths and physics on a smartphone, if that's the only thing that a lot
No,
of times.
I actually have, my younger one is 5.5. So,
No, you don't.
how does he learn reading and writing? Because that's something that's taught very physically, right? Because you need motor skills. So I think that there has been certain development milestones, which I would not say are delayed. They've just gotten pushed a little bit. But I'm sure that we will have a way to catch up.
Yeah. I think we're running, reaching the sort of kind of time limit, but I'll just ask you a question on your higher education initiatives on the university, and what are broadly the plans that you have for that?
So we have the SSN College of Engineering, which is in Chennai. It's in the top 10 private engineering colleges in India. We have the Shiv Nadar University in the north, in Dadri. It's a multidisciplinary university, and perhaps one of the youngest institutions of eminence, which has been awarded by the government of India recently. And we have just established the Shiv Nadar University in Chennai, which is just about starting with the School of Engineering, which is 2 courses in data science and artificial intelligence. So the idea is to have higher education in the north and in the south, and both of them to be multidisciplinary universities cutting across, and we can provide quality education and access across the board.
One last question: you took over from your father in July. How has life changed? I mean, are you now taking a more hands-on role in the business as well?
So actually, it was last July. So
I know it's an out of curriculum. Sorry, it was last July. My apologies. I know it's an out of curriculum question, but I'll ask it nonetheless, please.
No, it was last July. I think it's been the same and a little more. But I think Bodhi, life would just be easier if I could, we could be a lot more together physically.
Sure.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for agreeing to do this. I think that was
Thank you so much, Bodhi. Thank you.
vibrating discussion. Thank you so much.